What's up, everybody? This is the Left Eye Podcast, Alternative Blacks Podcast, coming at you live from YouTube. My eye is burning for some reason, so that's something. But today we got a special episode. As I splash myself with beer, a special episode for you because we did successfully do something.
We did.
This past weekend. We brewed our first beer, and I guess the many caveats to that, or like the many just clarifying statements, is you and I have both done some home brewing. We obviously did the collaboration beer with Love City, but we have never just sat down together and attempted to create a beer, and that's what we did this weekend on a much larger scale than any of the home brewing that we have ever done. So it's going to be a very painfully honest episode.
Yeah.
But I think before we get into any of that...
Real beer!
Real beer! What are you drinking?
I'm actually drinking Victory pretzel beer. It's a toasted ale with sea salt. There it is. It's from their scratch series, their small batch series, rather, not scratch series, that'd be Trogs, right? The small batch series, it's like a traditional German beer with a little bit of sea salt. It's a little darker, as you can see, kind of going towards like the Bacchish profile. And it is really good. It's 7.5%, which is great, especially for this type of beer. I wasn't expecting it to be so punchy. What's that?
So high.
It is high. That's what kind of makes me like. That's why I say it's kind of more like a Bacchish type of beer.
Yeah.
It's like a Dunkel Bacchish rum, but it's definitely a little sweeter than Bach. Is one of the better beers I've had from Victory in a long time, actually. So I'm pleasantly surprised with Victory's pretzel beer, as it were.
Now, I'm always wondering if there is a knock if you Bach beer out there.
If there's not, there needs to be.
And we should do it. Let's copyright that shit right now. Right now!
We'll put it in whatever document we have for stupid beer names.
Oh, I have like 10 different documents for that.
Yes, knock if you Bach. And then I go to Untapped. Oh, speaking of, I would rate this like a 4.25, I think. 4.25 might approach higher depending on how it keeps sipping.
We're not that creative. There's a lot of knock if you Buck beers.
That's bullshit. I don't know. That's goat shit.
That was good.
Wait, so there's a Nuck if you Buckley, and then there's a block of flats. I'm not getting a knock if you buck. See, if we do knock if you buck, then we just have to incorporate some type of knocking.
I see knock if ya Bach, Y-A Bach, and then Bach. I see knock if you Bach. So I see one from Burgers Brewing. I see one from Crafted Culture. Those are the ones I see that are knock if you Bach. Knock if you Buck, I see from Wooden Robot. I see Knock if you Buckley from Fort Fires. Knock if you Buck.
Okay, it's popping up now.
Yep.
Okay, I don't know what literally 2 beers popped up before. I don't know if it set me up for failure.
Set you up for failure. Yeah, no, we set ourselves up for failure.
I set us up for failure. That's a story for post. Tyler's drinking. Tyler, what are you drinking?
Oh my god. I am drinking. I'm making sure that we're live. That's what I'm doing. Okay, we're live. So, as always with these chats, I have not figured out a way to see how many people are actually watching and if they're commenting. So I have my phone in front of me just in case, but I would see it on the delay. What am I drinking? So today was a beautiful day. Sacred Vice is finally starting to roll out some of their 4 packs at their Sacred Vice Berks location, which you got a chance to visit this past weekend, and they were playing some Cowboy Bebop on vinyl, which was great.
That is peak ambiance for a brewery, I think.
I think so too. And I love them because actually, like what you see behind me too is kind of like Sacred Vice-esque because they have the brewery on some neon lights synced up to the audio, which we don't have here, obviously. But
Hold on. Was that what you were going for?
no, it just kind of like it linked right now.
All right. I thought first you would be the person to like do that.
Right. No, this was all unintentional. There's some Jeep swag in the background.
Insufferable.
Insufferable. You're in the insufferable category too.
But you know they really mean like you know what type of Jeep owners they mean.
They're talking about Wranglers. Wranglers.
That's fair. They are talking about Wranglers. What type of beer are you drinking there?
I'm drinking Rubbish, which is one of their IPAs.
Wow, that's a bit harsh, Tyler. I mean, geez.
Yeah, it's one of their IPAs. I actually don't have the description for it, but the can art's pretty cool. I just realized when we went to pick up the beer today that Plinth that they have is one of their IPAs. That's a collaboration with Hidden River. Yeah.
Because Burks, no, is Hidden River. Now, there's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Really?
Like in the active beer game.
Yeah. No, that was pretty cool.
That game.
Yeah, and so I realized today too that Sacred Vice's location is. Do you remember Art in the Age, the cocktail spot that I brought you to?
Yeah, an old city.
Yeah, their company, Quaker City Mercantile or whatever. It was like a parent company. It was basically who did all like the marketing and stuff for them. They do a lot of marketing and whatnot. But they were the ones that owned it on top of owning like Tamsworth Distillery and some other things. But I guess their offices were at the Sacred Vice location. So we just happened to be sitting next to the owner and his friends. And so I was just picking up like random bits of information as I was sitting there.
You always find yourself in these situations that I just do not understand.
I'm drinking Rubbish. It's fairly good. It's not rubbish at all. Very good beer. The Plinth was probably not a good idea to have prior to this because it's very Hidden River-esque. It's up there. It's hazy. It packs a little bit of a wallop. And so I'm feeling good. But then, like on the other hand, too, this is a lot lighter. And so I miss that, like, resinous, flavor from all of that. So.
Yeah, you didn't cleanse your palate. According to Untapped, the Rubbish recipe, they took the hazy IPA down to its simple parts: Pils malt, flaked wheat, and oats, single hop with Citra. Candy sweet and tangy and crushable at 6%.
I would say it hits all of that, so it's obviously an easy 4.0, probably sitting at a 4.5. We talked about this over the weekend too. My scale has become so much nicer.
So much nicer.
So nicer. So much. Oh yeah, words. Over the years. I think this is actually a really good opportunity to just kind of jump straight into the conversation about what was our brewing weekend, because let me tell you, I'm still tired.
Yeah, it was, and I thank you for opening your home to our brewing attempts, because I know that causes a lot of added stress, having to deal with
Connor?
Like the additional cleanup, storage stuff, removing things around, making it work, and that's no small task. So
I honestly, that was the least of my worries. Like we moved, we got the spaces set up to work in our favor. Um, the, I
You
mean,
know, and
honestly,
it was go like we had it planned out well,
yeah.
and we ran into uh, some technical issues that you know, I think it just comes with using a piece of equipment and a type of piece of equipment for the very first time, and not really understanding exactly how it worked 100% through to the point, you know, where if you had to troubleshoot it on the fly, it would be a simple task. And of course, yeah, I think that's kind of where the troubles began. Um, we so we set out to make a pretty large batch of beer.
What
Uh,
do we think? Like 7 gallons originally?
it was eight, but then we downsized it to seven before we started. And we to accomplish this, we have a very fancy brew kettle, courtesy of Mama Washington.
Mama Washington bought me a nice little kettle that I misplaced some pieces. So that was like another added element. It was like, all right, we need to cover this hole. How are we going to cover this hole? Wait a minute, the thermometer is somewhere.
You know, I think it's funny, like going back and now you might think generally maybe let's call it no more than 3 hours, maybe 4 hours for a brew, for like a home brew, maybe, right? And that if you include like setting it up, getting it up to whatever temp, getting up to boiling, then the hour boil, then cooling it down, like cleaning everything, putting it away, putting all the equipment away. Maybe you would say 3.5 ish, 4 hours would be right around where you think we might be. And I think that's where we probably thought we might be on the long end of that, but we pretty much doubled that time.
I'm trying to think. We started at what, like 4 o'clock maybe?
It was like 3:30.
And we finished at 12:12. I remember that number very well. We finished at 12:12. And so I mean we put in time.
We we put in time. We put in a full day, and the thing is, if that, we started the brewing process at that time, but prior to that, we were attempting to put the kettle together. We were on an excursion to get propane and ice, which we didn't get
Ice was
originally. Um, so there's a lot of like things that I think if we knew all of that type of stuff, or say we had everything we needed and we didn't need to go or even assemble anything, that still only took an hour away, pretty much.
I think we need to talk about the beginning of this excursion first, though, right? Like we had everything, like we had our mise en place pretty much set up. You know, we kind of got
We
it.
were meeting busted.
Yeah, we were. We got everything measured out. We were prepped. We knew what we wanted, and then we needed to get this propane still. You know, for all the things that we had, we didn't have propane. We needed an extra airlock, and we needed ice, which we wouldn't get until much later. And so we did all of these things in a different order. One was coming through Amazon, one we had to go grab, and the other one we had to go grab later. This propane tank run starts at a beer distributor, because rightfully so, you should get some beer to drink while brewing, but also serves as a practical thing because we need more bottles.
Right.
Because we were anticipating a lot more bottles initially, like upwards to 80 some bottles, to with our original like batch ideal like scenario. So we stop at a brewery, thank God, not a brewery, a distributor, and pick up some beer. And as we get out, we're parked in by a double parked car again. Thank God, because as then we pull out finally.
That's great.
Yeah, we get to the next intersection, and we didn't hear anything. All we see is a blue SUV sitting in the middle of the intersection with the front end of this vehicle gone and flames starting in
Yeah,
what used to be the front of the car.
it was, and thankfully they turned the car off then, I believe,
Yeah.
and whatever was burning burned out. But oh my gosh, like for a second there, I'm like, Tyler, like start going in reverse.
Well, did you see this weekend up in what's it, Clifton, New Jersey? What happened?
No.
A car on the highway crashed into a vehicle, like, so basically a vehicle that would be, I guess, comparable to the vehicle that crashed on 995 that like melted the bridge, crashed into that. And so then a fire broke out on this
Oh,
highway. Huge explosion. The lane of traffic that was behind it stuck, and like you could see cars stuck like sideways from they're all trying to pivot at the same time. The other lane's completely blocked now. Like, I was talking to Hannah, I was like, I'm a couple cars back. I am sacrificing the vehicle, her car, my car. I will leave Bertha there and I will walk away. I will just get out of the car and go, because there's
yeah.
no way I'm going to be part of that domino effect of boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, it that's crazy. I did not know that. But it kind of felt like it might be going that way with this because, like I said, there's flames. The car was completely totaled, 100% completely totaled. And then there was another car, basically two cars facing like complete opposite directions, like back to like butt to butt, like tail to tail. And that car was not quite completely as bad total, maybe, probably, but it was like head first into like the sign of like a strip mall, and it just looked like that car somehow caused the accident because like how do you end up there? Turns out it was the other way around, right? It was so bad that somehow this car ended up doing like a 180 after getting hit. Crazy. What's really crazy is we didn't hear anything.
No, that was wild, because I just imagined like the sound it should have made being alive.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, she must have been flying so fast that like it just kind of was like a boop.
It crazy. So we narrowly avoid disaster and then drive to get a combustible pressurized tank to put in the back seat.
Put in the back seat. Thank God that was like the only thing that would have been in the back seat at this point would have been beer. Like, I thought about that the whole ride back. We stopped at what, 3 places? We stopped at the beer distributor. We stopped at IGA, which had no propane there. They recommended going to Home Depot or Lowe's. We drove by Wawa just to check, saw no signs of propane life, and so just went to Lowe's. And on the way back, this in the backseat of the car, I'm just thinking the whole time, like, if someone just like comes into the side, like, this is fucking like
Like, well, it's over.
terrifying. Which leads into probably what was the second big issue of the day. Like, when we started actually brewing and getting everything going, like we put the whole like pot together, that seemed to be working fine. Then we put the propane and the burner together, and at first it was like, cool, this is fire, like we got this. And we're like trying to get this thing to boil. We've already like sacrificed malts at this point.
Yeah.
And we just hear a
and then we hear this like pop almost.
yeah.
And the flame just arrests. It goes out. There's an open flame in the end of the line, and we're like, what is happening? So we shut it off. We're trying to read the directions and like troubleshooting stuff. We apparently missed some fine print because it's all the way at the bottom. Apparently, we missed that. So we're trying to figure this out. We like rig it back up and we actually kind of get it going, but it's like
So small.
it's not blowing like it should.
Keeps blowing out.
It was like minuscule flames and it kept blowing out. And it didn't help that it was somehow in your confined backyard, somehow it was very windy still. And I couldn't quite comprehend how that was happening.
It's the alleyway. It's just a major wind tunnel.
Yeah, but it just like getting it to a boil took like an hour and a half to 2 hours, I think, total. From like the time we started heating it to the time that we actually got it up to a rolling boil because of our issues with this burner, probably took upwards of 2 hours instead of like 15 minutes. And I think, and that was obviously like the real big like hang up here in the process was us not understanding the burner, trying to figure it out and troubleshoot it, having the same issue happen multiple times. Finally, I don't even remember who it was who like pointed out what the issue actually was, and we were yeah, and we realized that we had the line screwed on upside down into the propane tank, which meant that the portion that's actually supposed to be controlling the flame was not really accessible
and I think
or manipulable.
So when we originally had set it up, and then we had the first knockout issue, like the pop back, and then the as you were adjusting the nozzle on the top of the actual propane tank, you actually hit the gauge for the gas, and that's what I think ultimately ended up being what was prohibiting like the right type of flame going forward until Hannah read the print.
Right, because at some point, and this is actually I think what ended up elongating the process for us is we actually you and I kind of got it back working inadvertently because messing around with the tank, we must have knocked the arrestor or like the controller up to allow more fuel through, and we inadvertently got it to work again, and then it ended up messing up again because of the same issue as the first time, and so once again we're back at it's kind of like when Westbrook would make like a really bad like 3 ball and everyone would go, that's not good because now it's going to embolden them to take another one.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. Like we figured out something that worked, but we didn't understand why it worked. And it added like another hour to ended up adding like another hour to the process. That being said, that portion of it, huge learning opportunity for us. I think we do this again. We are now, I think we have some solutions worked out for a windy day. I think we have obviously the control of the flame, a good understanding of that now. So I think moving forward, that portion of it is in a pretty good spot. And in terms of like, at least for me, in terms of stressors in the process, like that was the biggest one for me, because of how persistent it was throughout the day and how it elongated the process.
Yeah, and I think arguably this was the issue that could have had the most consequences, right? Like, first time really dealing with propane in this type of sense. We've done our fair share of like grilling and whatnot, but actually having to control the flame in this kind of capacity at this type of output, and with thank God we got a system that had these kind of like safeguards to prevent anything from really like being more consequential than it actually ended up being. Like, yeah, we ended up having to like brew a lot longer, but like the other side of that is the propane tank would have blown up.
Yeah, exactly. And and on the opposite end of that, in the less consequential but still like sucky sense, it doesn't turn on at all anymore, and now we don't have beer at all.
Right.
We don't finish the process that we worked so many hours to that point um, to get to. So I think that was a victory for us, uh, which is why I chose this beer today, because it's a victory. It is a victory for us, I think, this whole first go at it, regardless of what the end product is, because just learning how to work with the equipment, how we work, how we're working in the space. I think we found out things that like work and don't work, and we kind of felt that.
Yeah, and I think that like takes us to issue number 2, I guess. Which would have been, we got this kettle. It's this beautiful like 20-gallon kettle, with valves, with thermostat, like a thermometer on it, and we're talking about the things that need to be on it, whatnot. I think initially, with the mindset of it being maybe just a 4-hour thing, we were going to try to work out how how the valves worked in order to like just make the dumping process a lot easier. But the boiling thing took way too long. And before I even get to the other issue, it was one of the first pieces that went on, which was probably the easiest piece to go on, which was probably should have been a red flag for me in the first place. We get there, the water's right there, it's not causing any issues. We have everything in here, and we think, oh, we are good. And the malt is in there now, things are moving along, and all of a sudden we just see this trickle coming out of one of the valves.
And we were like, shit. This is like this is like a death sentence, right? I thought like there's no way this is gonna work now at first.
Yeah, and it's mind blowing because like we had water up to that point, like we and because obviously we didn't want to get stuff in there and have this happen, so we're checking everything for these leaks, and this just happens out of nowhere at a point where the water is way too hot to like do anything to. Like you can't put your hand in there. Like it's done. Like you're dealing with this issue, and we're just hoping and praying. We're like, okay, well, it's either gonna boil down and leak out at the same time, and then we just deal with what we have, or we got to figure out a way to stop this.
Yeah. And thankfully, you guys dealing with a dryer had something that some tape, some plumber's tape that kind of like kept it at bay just enough.
Whatever the fuck that means.
What's that?
Whatever the hell that means.
we didn't lose. We ended up really not losing anything, because once the heat kicked in and the tape actually activated, it sealed right up, and we were fine. But we were dealing with that in conjunction with the burner issues, which is why that it was like the perfect storm where we can't get this thing hot enough to get to a boil. It's also too hot to mess with,
right?
And with leak that can only be fixed by putting your hand inside the kettle. So there was like no winning. Yeah, it was like we would have had to sit for like an hour and start over.
No.
And still figure out the burner, which has not happened.
Because of the later issue, we know it would not have been an hour.
Yes. It would not have been an hour, although I have a theory as to why it. There's a couple issues with the next issue, which I think is something that I think this portion is something I didn't necessarily expect, but I wasn't surprised.
Right.
at because so with like the home brewing 1 gallon kits, right? It always says, hey, get like 10 pounds of ice, a couple of small bags, put in your sink, little 1 gallon uh kettle. You stick it in the sink with the ice bath, and in about an hour, in about 20-ish to a half an hour, it should be 60-ish degrees. And it's always twice the length of time for me. I don't know if you've experienced that as well in your own home brewing, but it seems to always take longer to cool than what they say it's going to take.
Right.
Um, and then that brings us to the issue of we have this nice little chiller, but it only runs water.
Right.
Now we have the cold water is just ambient, and we're coming off a 3 week long heat wave.
Which was just boiled water.
Cold. So the cold water is probably like 80 degrees, right? And I would say this chiller, it took the tubes it came with don't work. So that was one issue. But you swiftly figured that out pretty much. You got it to work. So we're getting this thing to work. It's hemorrhaging water in terms of usage.
I've already come up with a solution for this, but yes.
Yes. And I've actually have a bit of a solution too. We can brainstorm on that for the next time we try this.
Beautiful.
But we're hemorrhaging water. I would say the first 100 degrees wasn't terrible.
It dropped fairly like
It dropped from like 200, from like the boiling-ish 200 degrees to about 100 degrees. It worked pretty well, and that makes sense considering the water was probably about 80-ish degrees.
Now hold up too. I want to make it very clear. We did turn off the burner.
Listen, we made some stupid decisions in this process, so that was not one of them. But like it was just too hot outside. It's been too hot. The water supply isn't cold enough. It can't be colder than like 80-ish degrees. So what happens once that wort is down to like 100-ish degrees? That water isn't cold enough to really do much of anything. And it was just holding at like 90, 95-ish degrees for like a while. And the water is just continuously running, running, and running.
I mean, it looked like Dorney Park water, the water park. Like my backyard was just like, ah!
Which it didn't. You couldn't even really tell how bad it was at the time because by this point it is night time. Remember, we started at like 3-ish. It's now like 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and this is when we actually finished boiling. And we're trying to like get everything sanitized while this thing cools down, and it's not cooling down, and it's still just too hot. And so make the decision to try to put it in the tub and get a bath going for it, like it has a fever.
Yeah. We put some cold water in there, and at that point, I'm like, I'm running for ice, and it's late as shit at this point, right? It's like 11 o'clock, and so I run to Wawa, and I get the ice that's inside because like when you walk in, there's this ice box out front, and I'm just like, great, like someone has to unlock it. There's a crackhead right by the box, like tweaking. Like this is gonna be a fun time. Everyone's like back from the club in this Wawa, like getting their food, so I'm in this long ass line just waiting, and I'm like, I had like 2 bags of ice, and she rings me up for 3. I'm just like, I said, I'm like 2 bags of ice. And I'm glad I clarified because there's moments where I've been like, no, 3's fine. You know what? That's probably a sign. She goes, all right, bet. She says that. She goes, bet. The ice is in the back. And I'm like, oh shit, all right, cool. And I go back to get it, and there's only 2 bags of ice in this bitch.
Oh my.
I'm like, so I get these 2 bags of ice. I park. I run back inside. Throw these bitches into the like tub, and we hit a point too where like the temperature threshold that we were initially aiming to get this down to, we were just like, fuck it, we're gonna up it by like 5 to 10 degrees, and if we can get to that, we're dumping.
Yeah, we're done.
Because
Like,
the other issue is like we wanted to do a bigger batch, but we also are limited. I have a 5 gallon bubbler and two gallon bubblers, and you had a 2 gallon bubbler.
right.
And they just don't really make anything for, like when you get to like 20 gallons, you're like gonna have to start doing some other things.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the cooling thing, I think between the cooling and the burner and the time that it took for both of those things to happen and the length that it took uh, to try to get the brew going in spite of that, the leak happening in the middle of it, like the long hours that have passed, by this time we are like mentally drained, and we finally have this cooled wort or put this cool wort, and we're going to pour it into uh these fermenters, and even the fermenters like were giving us trouble at this point, like screwing on the spigots. We were getting leaks. We couldn't figure out why.
It had been
Never had a problem with leaks before.
it had been so long though. I feel like it had been so long since either of us have really like attempted this stuff, and like so we're mentally like exhausted. It is like 12 o'clock at this point, and so we have this bad boy behind us who is actually and even now you can see it's kind of like clearing up a little bit. Still a little hazy. It's hard to tell within the crawl space, but she's clearing up a little bit. But the to put on the like nozzle, we have all these like rubber gaskets and like these plastic screw parts, and we're like trying to piece it together. We're not really reading off of any of our like original kit like instruction manuals, because we finally tried to do our own thing, and we're just getting this leak out of every single one, and we're trying to figure it out. We're transferring sanitizer water from the big guy to the little guys back to the big guy, and we're like, what the fuck is happening?
And it's always leaking. And we don't have no rinse, which is another L on our part, I think.
I have so many pliers and vice grips, but the wrench somehow was the one tool in these arsenal of tools that I have in this house that I don't have.
And that was causing issues. So it's just like there was nothing we could do to make things work.
But it was a simple mistake for that.
It was a simple mistake in that we forgot that you had the 2 washers, not the one, which was really dumb because we had everything sitting in the sanitizer for hours. So it's just like they were there, and we just did not at all like process why we were screwing things up.
Because we weren't getting screwed right.
And so, in conclusion, there, and I think for me, it's like, okay, so that's something that we do next time. That's going to be so simple, right?
Yeah.
Like we know now. Not having the no rinse was annoying because you had to swish it, you had to run it through, and then you had to go back through and rinse it, and that's a little annoying. If we get the no rinse stuff, I think it's just going to be so much simpler. Yeah. But that was just one of those. That's like a small thing. It just was one of those like needles on the haystack, or not needles on the haystack, like straws on the camel back.
The straw that broke the camel's back. It was the cherry on top.
Yeah. so many cherries on the top. And uh, by that point, we're like, screw it. We're bringing this beer down, and we're going to pour it in. And we're like, oh, we only have 4 gallons. I thought we wanted 7. And what I forgot in that moment, um, in pulling this recipe and process together, was using boiling a small amount of water to get your wort with the extract and adding the rest of the water in later so that you don't have to boil and cool the entirety of the batch at once. And so this what the process was meant to do, as I now that we're like 5 days ish removed from this, or 4 days, whatever it is, was the numbers that I came up with for that were based on that principle of you put a portion of it in, you put half of the water in, you work you work with the extract in conjunction with half of that, knowing that you're going to cut the rest of the water in after the wort cools down, so that you don't have to. You're only having to heat half of the water and cool half of the water, and it should help you.
So I guess where my hesitation with is like adding in this water later too, though. I think I almost would have rather. We need to start earlier, regardless, right? Like we can't wait till mid afternoon to like
Yeah,
start the
it's
shift.
got to be a morning thing.
So we can't go to middle child. We can't get BLTs. Like we
They're so good though.
they were so good. But I think my other point is I'd rather like wait the time for it to cool down with having boiled the water, just because I know Philadelphia's water is not great. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. If
So that, well, the interesting thing about that is, like the boiling is going to remove a lot of things from the water in terms of impurities, but in terms of like the hardness of the water and like the solids in it that are unique to that water, that's always going to be there.
right.
You can't really boil that out. That being said, I 100% agree with you on the fact that, say we just put all that water in from the beginning and boiled the entirety of it, I think we had a way better product
Yeah,
than if we do
100%.
it this way.
Yeah.
Um, and I do think, because of our like the mishapness of it, I don't know how much worse for where we would be cooling or heating this
Yeah.
with more water.
I mean, we would have been taking shifts. Like,
Yeah.
all right, I got these next 4 hours. You got the following. Fuck the beach the next day. Like,
Yeah. I gotta call out. I'll call off for work.
right,
You
I might
know,
get back
it's
on
like,
Thursday. Like, well,
yeah,
I'll be done brewing by the time the live starts.
yeah. Like it was that type of thing. And the crazy thing is, the way that the process was supposed to go, besides our hiccups with the heating and cooling, by the end of it, we actually had what we wanted in that methodology. It was just, with all the mental fatigue, to see that we only had the 4 gallons. If we were fresh, we would probably say, hold on a second, let's go back, let's read through these processes real quick and just figure out like where the discrepancy is, and is this correctable now. Before pitching that yeast, we would have been able to correct it in the way that we would have gotten the bulk, or we would have gotten the volume that we wanted and the ratios that were supposed to be there.
Right.
Um, Albeit with that unfresh water, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
okay with this monster that we have behind us, which is actually like all dropped down since I've been here. Um, I'm okay with this monster and seeing what happens here, um, versus adding that water in. I think I would have rather like say this was wrong. We should have added some water in and go from there versus like adding that water in and then just having so much that's like the wrong thing too. You know what I mean? Like if I had to
So,
mess something up, I'd rather have less of that amount.
I mean, that's fair, but technically, the way we were doing it was the correct way. It was just in the moment, I had forgotten that portion of it, or
I know it's the right way. It's just
but it's not the way we want to do it.
yeah. Let's just see what happens here, and if we want to like play with that way again and go forward with it, then like then we'll do the cut.
Yeah,
Maybe it's as simple as like boiling the water ahead of time, like the additional water that we're going to add in, and just kind of trying to treat it early and like let it cool down or whatever, like and it's like have it contained somewhere and in a state that we like. But we're also the point that we're at too. We're not at a point of testing stuff either, like to see
yeah,
if
we
it's
have to
hitting the
get a
qualities that we
process
want.
down.
Right. We just got to get we just got to be able to brew right the first place.
Yeah, so like if yeah, like going into it, so the nice thing is the way this worked out, um, we actually have we actually have the ingredients aside from maybe needing a few more hops to just run this back as is. Like we have enough ingredients to just run this back and do it the way that we wanted to do it, which is adding all like having that wort that 7 gallons or 8 gallons at the boil and boiling that down to the 7 gallons.
I have a question for you. How many gallons of water do you think we just hemorrhaged on the chili?
Uh, I don't want to know. Usually there's probably a gallon per minute rating on the on your spigot. So whatever that is, times a lot of minutes.
So the hope is we were looking at like Lowe's and whatever, and we found like what seemed to be the most reasonable price thing was this like plastic container. It's about 55 gallons. Um, for essentially water, and it has a bunch of different places to connect. And so what would happen is we rather than just have the hose just go off to the side and like down the concrete to the thing, the hose would now attach to that and fill that up as it's doing the chill. Obviously, I want to figure out something to actually chill the line prior to it reaching the immersion chiller to help bring it
Yeah,
down and regulate the
which
temperature as
that's the
well.
portion that
Chris, where'd you go?
that's the portion that I think was he's a chemical engineer, so he knows chemistry.
Yeah.
Um, so he gave me some ideas that I think we could work out, and then also he
Sorry. Harry goes about tree fifty is how much we lost there.
it might have been more than that. It might have been fit 11.
Billy 11 time.
It might have been. We done ran through a gallon about 50 11 times. Cool in this work. But I think there's a way to potentially try to chill the water or keep the water relatively cool and recirculate that water. He suggested like an aquarium like pump, like for an aquarium, and hooking that up to the chiller. So if we have this big old drum, we could use the drum as the water basin basically and just fill that up and then just run the water continuously through that basin and recycling it so we're not hemorrhaging water the
Right.
entire time. And that's reusable water. And then we like figuring out a way to cool it could be, he was talking about like a copper coil, because copper has really good heat transfer, and just having that in the vat of like whatever reservoir, so like that plastic drum,
Look, I could just run
having it
out
there
and like
cooling the
steal a bunch of
water.
copper from the neighborhood.
Or do that.
I finally figured out how to use the chat, how to get the chat pop up here. I'm happy.
We're in business now.
Yeah, I don't even need my phone out anymore. I can see the fucking chat.
Perfect. And I will close this so that I can conserve bandwidth. All right. Yeah. So I think there's some like big solutions that we have. We obviously didn't. We obviously didn't reach the particular product that we were going for, but we completed the process. We had a bunch of troubleshooting things that I think we successfully figured out. Like we had a lot of small victories in this entire process. That's really what this first brew process was about. You know, if we get anything like good out of this beer, that's a huge win.
What we
The
did.
fact that it's fermenting is huge. To me, that's like win in itself. I don't care what this beer tastes like. I'm just excited to see what it turns out to be. And plus, the good news of having such a small amount of beer compared to what we wanted is the bottling day is going to take half as long as it would have.
For sure. No, that's
So, what are your thoughts and takeaways from the day overall?
overall, yeah, that's what I was happy with. Like, I think my biggest thing was making sure that everyone was in a good place as we continued to move forward because I saw that it was going to take a lot longer than initially anticipated. You know, I think when we first started off, we had talked about, oh yeah, we're gonna play all these games at the end of the day. We're gonna be sitting around the table. Like the food should be like done by the time that we're done, and none of that actually ended up being the case. And so it was just like kind of gauging where everyone was at as we continue to move forward, and making sure that like just the fact that we did it together, all of us were there, we got a final product, like that was really a sense of accomplishment because up until this point we never really saw what it would be like to work together. Like you, me, and Alyssa like had the luxury of being at Love City and working together. But again, that's like we were more taking directions and like being like pointed at to go there and there and there. And this was actually having to work together, work through issues, find creative solutions, and I think it worked out pretty well. I think everybody brought something to the table, and I think we all kind of like did what had to be done. Completely exhausted. It is going to be a full day. It is only going to get more challenging and probably longer going forward. Not because of like this process will get shorter for this set of time, but as we continue to scale up, it's only going to get more intensive. And so, really realizing what we want to be a part of. Like we watched Kevin be somewhat a part of the process at Love City, but not for the full time and not having to deal it and being able to allocate it to this way and trust somebody to do some other things as well. So we do have to consider what happens when we get to a point if we continue to be able to scale up, which we hope to, you know. So I thought overall it was a really good day. I was very happy. Um, as I said, the biggest concern and the biggest thing for me was the amount of water that just was going. I was like, we talked about what does water waste look like at a large scale, but I didn't even realize what it was going to be at the scale that we were at. And so it's one of those things that I kind of want to get ahead of immediately to kind of
Yeah,
like
you
how do we
know,
leverage this? And if that becomes the irrigation system to some sort of like small farm attachment that we get to like create some other stuff that would work for our eventual kitchen, and etc. You know, like I just want to make sure that we are doing something that is efficient and you know, environmentally correct. You know.
yeah, and obviously the water is the main issue with breweries, the water waste. Um, Thankfully, sticking to say like a uh, industrial size, we're looking at like glycol chillers at that point, so we're not using straight water; it's recirculating.
Obviously, yeah, we'll be using
And that's really the issue here is like we didn't have a feedback loop, right? It's just going through, and that's really it. So if we can nail that down, boom, problem solved, you know? And I think there's ways that we can do that moving forward and make the chilling a little more efficient as well. Um, so once again, I think that's we didn't anticipate that problem. It's not something we thought about. Now we know what that problem is, and we can just try to find a solution, you know?
I agree. Um, Actually, I think that is really about it. This is only like 5 minutes over of the 7 o'clock time that we never start on, anyways. So I think we did a really good job. And if we feel comfortable wrapping this up, I don't have to use the bathroom at all during this episode.
You really just want that medal of not having to hit the bathroom for an
Yeah, because if
episode.
we go any further, I have to use the bathroom.
Well, I think as in terms of our brew day, I think that's pretty much we hit all the bases. Looking forward to the bottling day and making sure that the bottling day goes smoothly, which I don't see like that's far less involved of a process. It's just going to be that's just going to be exactly what we've done in the past, just more bottles, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, by the next time we jump on this call, we should be having these bottled and have a good next topic, right?
right. We next time we talk, we will be talking about our bottling experience.
That's exciting.
So
Yeah,
stay tuned for that.
yeah. And until next time,
Peace.
transition.